Hello, the internet, and welcome to another episode of Open Source Directions, the webinar that brings you all of your favorite news about your favorite open source projects. My name is Henry Badgery, and I'll be your host for this episode. And joining me as the co-host is...
Hi, I'm David Charbonneau, and I'm excited to be the co-host for this episode of Open Source Directions. I lead the development of OpenTeams at Quantsite, and I'm based in Durham, North Carolina.
Hi, I'm Patrick McFadden. I work at DataStax in developer relations, and I also work in the Apache Cassandra project as a contributor, community organizer, etc.
Hi, I'm Amanda Brock. I'm here in London where I'm CEO of Open UK. I work in a bunch of different roles in open source with Open Invention Network, Oasis, the United Nations Technology Innovation Labs, and a few others.
Awesome. Well, let's get into it. We're going to start off with our famous Tweet of the Week section, where each of our panelists are going to give their favorite tweet recently. So, Amanda, do you want to kick it off for us?
Yeah, I guess I was going to mention my own tweet, which seemed a bit wrong. I tweeted this week on an article I'd written for Information Age here in the UK. And in that article, I was talking about the COVID track and trace apps, and the whole Twitter thing is relatively new to me. I'm not a big fan. I started tweeting about 6 months ago, and I guess that's my best tweet ever. So I was going to talk about that, but it's not the best thing to talk about your own, right? So I'm going to give you Adam Shafto's tweet. And Adam quoted this. So I have been writing reviews for about 10 years. My wife's review of Alien puts everything I've ever written to shame. Alien is a movie where nobody listens to the smart woman, and then they all die, except for the smart woman and her cat. 4 stars. So there you go, guys. That's my favorite.
I love it.
For mine, I've used Inkscape on and off for many years, and I was actually surprised when I saw the tweet come through on May the 4th that Inkscape had hit 1.0. So if you're looking for an open source SVG editor, Inkscape is pretty wonderful, and in fact, it's been around for a long time. So I highly recommend it.
Well, mine is a little more angled to those of you dealing with homeschooling right now. And this is a little more ubiquitous to anyone who deals with trying to grade or help their kids with school. So this is one accidentally wrote henceforth in an answer on my 3rd grader social study quiz, and the teacher is suspicious. And I personally relate to that because I've gone through helping my son's 6th grade, and then I'm like, well, and then I treat it like an editor, and I'm like, that is probably a bad idea.
Yeah, my tweet for the week, obviously everyone's already seen it, but I just wanted to share again Elon Musk's reveal of his baby's name, which I thought was very, very crazy. I've never seen anything like that before. And I actually wanted to present that. Are you allowed to have numbers in someone's name? Is that legal?
Yeah, I've been reading that the state of California, folks have been opining that it doesn't meet the code, and that if they try to put that in the birth certificate, it will get rejected.
I would think the Greek letter would be the harder one, but okay.
Yes.
Yeah, because Grimes started off with the X and then the Ash, and it's X-Ash. And then Elon's edition was the A12. It's kind of...
I actually thought the Bitly link was part of the name, and then I realized, no, that's just something different.
That was a meme I saw, when your dad names you after the back of his router.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you very much for sharing your tweet of the week. That's always an interesting section to see what people have been looking at and sharing around. Now we're going to give a introduction to the project, and we're going to hear about OpenTechResponse. So OpenTechResponse is the hub for information sharing and coordination between open source projects responding to an emergency or a crisis situation. So I'm interested in learning more about the backstory of this great initiative. How did you come up with the idea, and who was involved?
It's really interesting, Henry. You mentioned open source there, and we try to use the term open technology, which is something that Open UK is focused on for a little while. I think we're probably the first group that's moved from being purely open source group to an open technology group, bringing the sort of hardware and data elements all together. And I think that's really critical for what we're doing here in the UK, but also for OpenTechResponse. I was in a call with Denise Cooper and Jacob Green and a few others. And we just got into the phase before lockdown, everybody waiting to find out when we were going to be locked down in our respective countries. And towards the very end of the call, somebody said, you know, hey, I've seen a project creating ventilators, open source ventilators in Italy, and somebody else had seen one in Chile, somebody else knew one in the UK. And we realized that we were all in different news groups, mailing lists, whatever, where we were constantly seeing these great projects coming up. And the kind of response that you'd really expect from the open source folk, right? Everybody wanting to help, everybody wanting to be involved, everybody wanting to do something now and knowing that they could, and running off and doing that, which was great. But we realized there were all these silos all over the world, because this is really a global problem, right? And we've not dealt with so many problems that are so clearly global for us to respond to at the same time. So we saw all these silos and we thought it would be a great idea just to create a space for people to find each other. And we weren't sure exactly how we would do that, but we would start with Slack. So Jacob Green, who's at Moss Labs, which is it's a John Hopkins incubated startup. And of course, Hopkins own the dashboard, which everybody's come to accept as a sort of standard for tracking and all the data and analysis, analytics, storage, whatever, around the whole COVID movement. So Jacob came up with, he spun up a Slack space for us, and I started to reach out to people. And I guess within a week, we had about 150 people. So my background is that I'm ex-lawyer. So I know a lot of the people who do the governance, who do the infrastructure, the community side, and the sort of organization around open source. And what we found was that they all related to the same issue, right? So they all saw this problem of silos and wanted to join something to help fix that. Somebody who I was speaking to about doing some PR for us introduced me to Patrick. And Patrick immediately suggested that when we built something out, we needed to think beyond COVID. We needed to think about the future and any other emergency, disaster, pandemic. We need a similar interaction or space for us all to interact and get together in a sort of space for the tools, kinds of tools, so that model would be repeatable and scalable, which was entirely down to Patrick. But that sort of fits with the way open projects grow, right? The more people you speak to, the more different elements come into it. I suppose really that the overall goal was just to bring people together, Henry.
It sounds like there have been a lot of great people involved so far. How has everything grown since you started the initiative?
Pretty organically, actually. I think my favorite story is that a lady who lives a few houses down from me is on a WhatsApp group, a mutual assist group with me. And she's a graphic designer. So she's designed the little logo and the banner for us. And it's that sort of community pulling together, people you wouldn't normally expect to be involved, get involved in all sorts of things right now. But what we've seen is, I approached you guys at OpenTeams because I knew Henry, and I'd spoken to Henry a few times to talk about databases. Patrick's obviously a big expert in databases. So started to talk to him because it seemed wherever we looked, we could see repos with some of the projects, but everything wasn't in one place. There wasn't an obvious spot for all the projects to be tracked or to be found. Or if you wanted to volunteer, there wasn't an obvious place for you to go. And we've just seen more and more people get involved.
Fantastic. So just when I think about this, it sounds like the real true value from this is that you're collecting people and projects. Is that the value, do you think?
I think there are two values. The first value is definitely that collection of people and projects, that bringing people together and information. Then I think the second is the tools that underlie.
Fantastic.
Well, to that end, what technologies and tools are being put together as part of the OpenTechResponse story?
Well, I mean, this is a big part of it is what do we do with the data, right? And but the first step of any database is collecting data. Yeah. And of course, this is one of the discussions that Amanda and I had, and that was the first conversation we had. She's like, we need to collect all the data. And I agree, we do.
Now.
Now.
You're doing the mandate.
Okay, I'll have that all next week.
You
I mean,
said that.
Yeah, I did say that. The problem and what technologies need to be involved kind of address the problem, and this is what Amanda and I were talking about is there's more trouble. There's an inertia about starting up anything, right? So, anytime there's a problem in the world, there's this lag time, like, okay, we got to go through the initial shock. And then there's oh, now I want to do something. Unless you're a first responder, there's inertia. And the reason first responders work really well is because they're pre-ready, they're trained, and they're connected, right? Mm-hmm. And, if you think about like what we're trying to do here, we need to have the technology to put things together. And I appreciate what OpenTeams has brought to this. You guys already have a really well-built system to do those kind of things, like connecting open source projects with people who are doing them. But this is, just this doesn't have to be really complicated. A simple way to collect people and projects, just in a web form, but a way to store that data. And I think the critical part is that data is now open, or will always be open. And that opens up a lot of chances for other people to do stuff with it. But just a very simple thing like that. And then the secret sauce is matchmaking. Mm-hmm. I have skills. I need, and you think of like, this is always a problem I find in emergency is we have a lot of really capable people and they feel helpless because they're like, well, what do I do with my skills? Well, there's, you could think of like during the fires in Australia or an earthquake or a tsunami or something like that. Like, well, I have awesome React.js skills. How's that going to help? Mm-hmm. But it can. And if if there's a project that is like, hey, we're building something and we sure could use front-end developers, well, that could end up not happening because they just don't know how to connect with each other. So, if you think of the technology, the secret sauce is connecting those people and saying, hey, you've got a need, you've got a skill, talk to each other, go. And that's it.
I know that at OpenTeams, we've really been excited to be a part of this and have been invited to participate and wholeheartedly agree with the overall vision and are really excited at the future or for the future prospects.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, very excited. I think there's no better team to really just tackle it like the open source community. I think one thing that really touched me, what you said, Patrick, was the fact that if someone has a programming skills, how can they help with something that's coded, like how can they help with something that's so physical? And I think this is a great initiative to all the contributors out there to know that you don't have to be sitting on your bottom at home doing nothing. Like, you can join this fight. You can become a part of it. You can make a difference. And that's what's really exciting about this.
Well, Henry, I was going to add, I think this is where, technology has a bad rap for a lot of reasons, but technology can also have a really positive influence on society if applied correctly. And I'm really glad that we're able to talk about it at this level. We could go somewhere completely different. We talk about tracking applications and things like that, personal privacy, and those are, there's some dark side to data and connecting people, but there's also a positive side. There's 7 billion people in the world. How do you connect that many people? And this is a huge technology problem.
It's definitely a technical problem, a technology problem. So now we're going to demo a few of the cool tools which have been put together and set up for OpenTechResponse. It's including some of the new features that have been added to OpenTeams to support the effort. So while we're getting ready, I would like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsor, Quansight, for sponsoring this episode of Open Source Directions. Quansight, creating value from data. So David, when you're ready, do you want to take it away?
I'm ready. So I just wanted to highlight some of the tools that have been thrown together and also issue some thank yous to folks that have made resources available to us. First off is we've got the Slack for OpenTechResponse. You can see there's a set of different channels that have been pretty active. I've got a lot of unread messages that I've got to get through, and it seems like every day there's a lot of discussion going on. So I want to encourage people to, after the show, follow the links and join the chat and find out what's going on. In addition to that, some folks don't necessarily want to use Slack. They would prefer an open source alternative. So we've begun establishing that open source alternative. Here I'm showing the Riot client for the Matrix chat software and protocol. And we've actually established 3 connections to the Slack room so that we've got bidirectional communication. So if you'd rather use Matrix as the way of interacting with OpenTechResponse, you can. And we'll be filling in more of these channels. I say we. I'll probably be building those connections over the weekend. But this is for immediate response and discussion. We also recognize that there's a need to build a knowledge base and host more long-form discussion. And Discourse was really super kind and gave us a free instance that we can use for the building that knowledge base and having that long-form discussion. I've seeded it with a little bit, but I'm excited to see what content that we can get in here into the discourse and see where the conversation goes. And another part of what we think, if you're building a knowledge base, that's because people have questions. It struck us that if there's a question that you have about integrating a set of open source technologies or applying them to a particular problem, if it's an integration problem, it's not clear who you talk to or what project you go to. So we built a help desk as a kind of catch-all. So in an emergency situation, if you've got a question, you can go to the OpenTechResponse help desk that was kindly provided by Help.io. Again, this is another open source product, and they are donating server resources to host our help desk. If you have a question for how to apply a particular technology to solve a problem, the OpenTechResponse help desk is there for you. This is integrated into our Slack channels. We're working through what the process is going to be, but the idea is come here and ask your question. OpenTechResponse will try to find a way to answer that question and get you connected with the right people. And then finally, what Patrick mentioned earlier was that need for matchmaking. And on OpenTeams, we've built a social network that has 15,000 developers that use and contribute to open source software and still growing every day. We've got a lot of projects and we need to add more of them into the site. So it's a great opportunity to provide that matchmaking. If a project has needs, we've got folks with skills profiles and we can do the matching. So we're working with OpenTechResponse to kind of define what the data we need to capture is and provide user interfaces to support that. As we scroll down, there's currently 2 things you can do that I'd like to show off. The first of them is that you can volunteer to join the response team. And what that will do is it'll add like a little raised hand onto your profile, indicating that you're available to volunteer in response to this global event. One thing I also want to say is that this isn't specific. We have capability specific to COVID-19 here, but we've actually built it so that we're ready for the next emergency as well. We've got more work to do there, but we're hoping to kind of grow this capability in the platform in the future so that we can be a part of this open source community's readiness to respond. In addition to that, we've got the call for volunteers. So if you are a project or a company or an organization that's looking for volunteers, right now, if you click this link, it'll take you to a Google form. We've actually got the database set up, but we're just working on the front end. So in the meantime, we're going to do manual data entry to the extent that we need to. And within a week or 2, I'm hoping that we will have some user interface support for issuing a call for volunteers directly within the OpenTeams application. Now, once somebody has volunteered, we can actually search for them, but I'm going to have to sign in to do the search. So let me do that real quick here. So if I want to find people who are ready to volunteer for responding to the COVID-19 crisis, I can come here and select COVID-19, and I can just hit apply. Now, I did this yesterday, and I was really surprised because I didn't think anybody would have raised their hand. I have no idea how many people have. Yeah, so we've already got folks, and this is with very little promotion. Folks are raising their hand and saying they'd like to participate in responding to the crisis. And if we go ahead and add a skill here, you can see, oh, okay, I guess there's no view folks. Let's add, pick one that I know has got to be in there, REST.
That's incredible. I haven't seen that before. That's incredibly exciting to see all of those people with that as actually announcing, launching.
Yeah, the only
zero
thing
promotion, actually.
Here's the promotion I did. And, oh wait, this is not me. We'll have to look. I'm logged in as my demo user, so I did post something on OpenTeams.
Don't worry.
I do have a lot of followers, but
you know, you should never do a live demo, David.
I know.
This
is really real. Yep.
In blue screen, that's good.
Oh, and I forgot to show that, you know, when I did the search earlier, you do get that special little hand that's on your profile. So let's go ahead and do the search real quick again. Oh, you know what? I wonder if I've got a caching issue. Well, live demos. You will get a special hand on your profile. I will fix that to indicate that you volunteered. Now, where we're going with this in the future, right now, if you go to a project's profile, and I'm just going to pick one at random. If you're the project leader, we're going to add some capability into these profiles so that you can directly issue a call for volunteers from your project's profile page. And when you come back, you'll actually have some special tools so that rather than having to go through the search, you'll just be able to select a particular volunteer opportunity and say, show me the matches. And it'll show you the people that have the skills that match your call for volunteers.
Fantastic.
And that's it.
Well, that's great. It seems like we've got a little bit of everything. We've got the Slack, the discourse, the functionality matching on OpenTeams. I am interested in learning what drives technology choices for OpenTechResponse.
I think essentially it's the right solution to bring people together. So obviously we're all about open tech. We want things to be as open as they can be.
Fantastic.
And open data. I mean, open data, in my opinion, is that's when we talk about open sourcing ideas. You know, there's the open source projects, which are fantastic. I'm involved in one, Apache Cassandra, but open data can be just as important in that way. I mean, Amanda works with open data in the UK government, and it's important. You know, that's important because these are your taxes are at work here, and that's a different problem. But if you think about trusting as well, I think in terms of like what OpenTechResponse can do is that this is not personal information. This is information that we want to amplify, and opening it gives us more of an opportunity for this to turn into something really important. You know, I love implementations. You know, when I see open data sets and I see what people do with visualizations or with applications, it's really fascinating. Like in San Francisco's, the city opened up its data set for the police department, and people were building some really cool implementations on top of it. You know, like here's some information. Like, don't park here because there's a lot of break-ins. You know, we pretty much San Francisco, but park in Oakland. But I mean, it's like you don't know what people are going to do until you let it go free like that. And I'm anxious to see what will happen in the future. But right now, we need to get people involved.
Yeah, and I'm excited to start. So one of the things that we're going to be doing in the coming weeks is putting out a specification for what does a call for volunteers as a resource look like? What does a volunteer profile look like? And then come up with a set of protocols around how do you publish these so that sites like OpenTeams can aggregate it and put their perspective on it. So, you know, right now we've built a tool where you can sign up and volunteer through OpenTeams, but we want to open that up and federate it so that we're pursuing more of an open data, open protocol approach.
And that'll all be published on GitHub.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, I think it's been great to learn how this project started, about the technology underlying it and what's going to drive it. So I'd like to talk more about how the project's going at the moment and where it's heading. So Amanda and Patrick, what have people been doing so far as part of OpenTechResponse?
A lot of the sort of initial interaction, as you would expect, has just been people finding each other. So starting with the Slack and Riot spaces, working out who's around, bringing projects they're working on in, introducing it, and then sort of shouting out about what they're doing and finding others doing similar projects, bouncing ideas off each other. We've had people looking for help. So people who are building, for example, medical products, which would normally need a disclaimer and deal with all the legal stuff. So we've been sending them off to people for licensing and some of the legal help. A lot of interactions with people sharing things that would maybe get lost otherwise. I've seen quite a lot coming through from people like Gil Yehuda at Yahoo, just sharing information that it trickles across our group and then it trickles across all of their networks, which is just quite incredible.
That's great.
What do you see as coming next for OpenTechResponse?
Well, we have, as you mentioned, there's some elements like the GitHub repo that needs to be put together. And I think that'll be a great place to see some extra eyeballs on things like data specs, things like that. And then
we should say, actually, Patrick, that they've offered that up to us as well. So they've sponsored that space and donated it to us with the support. I think mentioned that was one of the many companies offering things.
It is, and this is such a typical thing inside of these type of projects. Is like, again, Amanda acting as the matchmaker here is like finding people who are willing to help but don't know where to help. Hey, here's the thing, and you just get this draw. There's a pull. People are like, yeah, I want to help. Oh, that's I can help there. And finding people with that kind of energy is like, it should not be Amanda's job. We could apply technology to this, but
we can scale it.
Yeah, we can scale Amanda.
Sure. No, I don't think that's a good idea.
Virtual. All right, we should rethink this. But anyway, like Siri, but for problems. And it has a cat. But,
yeah.
I think it's if you're a project that is looking for people to help out, or you want to advertise what you're doing, this is the time to start getting involved. I mean, this is your avenue to potentially getting a lot more eyeballs on your project. And this is that. I think that's what's going to bring people like the technologists, people who know how to do things. And it's not just software; it's hardware. It's open hardware specs are big part. It's like COVID is like, look at the ventilator projects. These are people who know how to do embedded systems and mechatronics and things like that. I mean, and these are all open specs as well. So it's not just software as much as I love to talk about software, and governance too. Look at what Amanda does. That's navigating all of the potential potholes of working with governments and NGOs and things like that. It takes expertise and volunteers.
And that brings up a critical point that I forgot to make that I intended to, which is that there's all sorts of contributions. And while my demo pointed out skills like Vue.js, skills like legal wrangling in the UK or in the EU, documentation, editing and writing, testing, any of these, security, any and every skill that you can imagine has an application in this situation.
Yeah.
And David, while we're confessing things we forgot to mention, we should also have talked about open science, because Open UK doesn't include open science in our definition of open technology. I forget. I reckon by the end of the year we will be including it, but for this project there's a huge amount of open science, and we have a lot of people from that community already in the Slack channel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. And that term open technology, I don't know that I'd heard it before, but it's been ringing in my ears since you mentioned it earlier. I like that term a lot. It feels very aligned with what we've been trying to do here.
Well, it's inclusive.
Yeah.
The world, yes, software is eating the world, and that's great. But to open technology, I I think you look at people like Bunny Wang, who is really big on the open hardware specs. And just look at what like companies like Adafruit are doing. I'm really impressed with that whole company and Lady Ada and all the people that work there. I mean, they have a for-profit company for sure. They sell they sell products, but everything is open, and they have been really instrumental in a lot of things that are happening inside, like right now with the COVID-19 epidemic. But
right, the open hardware is available, making these things possible.
Exactly. I've been watching their Sunday night live streams, and it's just amazing. So, I mean, yeah, everything counts, right?
Yeah, that's great. I just want to quickly remind anyone who's listening and tuning in, feel free to ask any questions. We'll be answering them very soon, but we'll still find out more about this project. So how can people get involved in OpenTechResponse for this great initiative?
So we should, and I don't think we have the Slack and Riot links. Henry, do you have them there?
I will go in and share that.
We should share those. We should definitely share those afterwards then. The landing page / website should be launched next week, and we are looking for volunteers. Patrick, do you want to talk about the volunteers?
Well, I mean, in particular, getting, you mean for the project side?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, we especially need to have projects signing up right now. I think that's what you're talking about. Yeah, and do we have a URL for that? And we should be providing that right away. We need to get as many projects as possible in there to create a critical mass. Like I said, to get a draw going. That's what's going to bring people to us, And yeah.
And what we will do a shout out in the next week or so, looking, I suppose, with some press for projects that would like some volunteering to step forward so that we can arrange for some matchmaking for them. We probably need half a dozen to really test it out, don't we? See if David's come up trumps.
It will, yeah, and this is a good opportunity if you have a project that is in need of help. This will be a good opportunity to amplify it, because we want to promote those projects, especially because we're trying to get more people that can do technology of any kind involved. And of course, what's going to get people involved there is like seeing projects that speak to them. There's some personal aspect to it. Like if this is something that I want to do, and I see it, and okay, I can go. Maybe there's more than one, but it seems like a lot of people have time on their hands right now. But in any case, I think just finding a critical mass of projects that make people want to be involved is really important.
Yeah, and then I guess OpenTechResponse.com will be up and running very shortly. And I think, David, you've just shared in that project needs form the little banner that's been made into a widget for folk to share and put on their social media, where on their website, supporting OpenTechResponse to help spread the word.
And I'll share my screen real quick again, just to show that page. So here's the form that if you are a project that's looking for volunteers, that link that I dropped into the chat will take you directly here, where you can fill in the form. And we will get your data into the database at OpenTeams, and we'll be able to provide you matches when you visit your project's profile.
Yeah, this is the critical thing we need to get done. And I don't think we're going to have any lack of projects that need help. Yeah.
No, I don't think so either.
Okay, great. Well, this isn't the last crisis, obviously, but we are going to experience more in the
Henry,
future.
you keep saying that. Do you know something we don't know?
I'm sure. We're going to see.
I'm running up with this one.
We're renaming him Henry Doomsayer.
Henry Doomsayer.
You just search
telling
anything
you all
on
for a
TED.
long time now.
If you search TED Talks, the thing we're missing, or the coming crisis of on TED, you'll have an entire weekend of binge watching that will freak you out.
So, on that note, how will OpenTechResponse be ready for that next crisis?
Well, I guess we've got everything in place, don't we?
Well,
all these tools, all these people. We're there.
Reduction of inertia that, it's the inertial mass that we're trying to reduce, and it's the bad thing happening, project created, people wanting to be involved, all, and then the connectiveness between that, all that has time, and there is an inertia that has to happen. I think of every other, I've been involved in plenty of emergencies in my life, from fires and terrorist attacks and pandemics. I mean, it happens, but there's always, there's a flow. And instead of having, I think a success factor that we could measure is, instead of taking weeks to see things start to pick up, measure it in days, and just immediately woof. And where we could turn people in our technology communities into almost like first responders, like the volunteer fire department, which is, the analogy that I think about is people that are at the ready, but whenever the bell rings, they can run, and we connect it right away.
That's great. That's really great. Well, thank you very much for that. We're now going to get on to answering some questions from the audience. So the first question is from Guy Martin. Hi, Guy. Amanda, can you talk more about where you see the role of open standards in this space? Obviously, standards take longer than open source, but to be prepared for the next emergency, it probably makes sense to coalesce on necessary standards to make interoperability a key component.
Well, Guy, you should be answering this, not me. So I don't know whether you guys all know Guy. He is the executive director at Oasis, the Oasis Standards Project. Hasn't been there very long. Congratulations on the new role, Guy.
Congrats.
I work with them on their open projects. I'm part of their advisory board there. It's going to be important, isn't it? But I think that the difficulty, as you say, with standards is it takes time. And who knows where we're going to get to. At the moment, it's hard to know 6 weeks, 2 months ahead, let alone the length of time it takes for the standard in place. So I think that they're important, but I think we will also end up with de facto standards. And it's probably a really good moment for Oasis's open projects to pick up some of the COVID standards, some of the ventilator, respirator type things that need to be done, Guy. We should definitely bring that into the discussion on the Slack channels.
I hope that we don't get too mired in the bureaucracy of something like this either. And I think the standards that we need to establish are in the aspects of sharing, so that we have. I think of it more as prescriptive for contracts. Like, if you're going to use this data, this is what it looks like. A lot less about the governance, which in this case, Patrick, so as somebody who's been a lawyer for 25 years, I no longer practice law, but who worked in that area for 25 years, it's been really important to me that we haven't tied this project down in any way. We've allowed it to flow, grow organically, see where it went as a community project. And when we do need to deal with some of the governance, we will, but that could be quite a long way away. And if you look, particular to COVID, it's changed things. So if you look at the UK, just as the example I happen to know, the government has offered an indemnity against intellectual property and some of the medical negligence type risks that you would normally have, to help people to free them up and to allow them to build this stuff and not be restricted. And I think that's what Patrick's heading to. This is a very specific, very particular time. So, we don't know what's going to happen 6 weeks, 2 months ahead. We really have to be flexible and not tied down, right?
Definitely. Okay.
For next question, what are some of the interesting use cases that you have seen for OpenTechResponse?
I don't think we've really seen that many yet, and that's the thing. Amanda has. Okay. But I think the use case that's applied right now in my mind is that we got everyone nodding their head that this is a long-term problem. No one is like, this is a one and done. Oh, once we have a vaccine, we'll just fold up our tents and go home. No.
There's going to be another one.
Oh, yeah. Go to TED. Remember I told you, man. What is it,
I think some of there have been people I don't know or I've never come across before who are involved in this whole Slack communications piece. And it's that amazing thing that happens with communities where everybody knows somebody and brings those people together. We've got a chap called Chris Masserman who works in NASA's, I'm just reading this, Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And Chris was sharing, they've got 3D respirators that you can print. So it's open hardware, and he was sharing on the Slack channel, and I've passed it on to some people I know in the UK who've been printing them in their garage. And it's interesting to see that kind of thing. And then some of the CERN folk have been involved as well, talking about the CERN open hardware license. I guess for me, that's quite an interesting learning curve, because it's not, hardware isn't my bag normally, although Open UK is getting more involved with it. It's a learning curve. And I think those projects, I mean, come on, we're dealing with CERN and NASA. That's super cool, right?
That's amazing. It's fantastic. It's
Very
great.
cool.
Pat, awesome. US government's next, and then the rest of the world. So thanks very much for that. We're now going to get to our famous rant and rave section, where we're all going to be given 15 seconds to take the light, take the stage, and have a soapbox. So let's go. Amanda, do you want to give it a rant or a rave first?
Can I do a little one of each?
Maybe one of each.
Both,
Why not?
I guess.
Why not?
Lockdown, yeah, lockdown related. So for me, I cannot stand people when I go out who do not know how to socially distance and who walk up behind me. It really, really annoys me, particularly if they're jogging. And they haven't got the proper wicking gear on, and they're sweating and running past too close. Not happy about it at all. At the same time, this whole lockdown thing, the kindness of people you didn't know. So I've been working with somebody on open data from Microsoft. I had a call with her, and it turns out we live like 100 yards apart, which we would never have known when we not talked about lockdown. And she's a car, which I don't. So she brought some things for my new kitten at the pet store, the big pet store in the city. So yeah, that's my
awesome.
nice thing. Yeah, the good stuff that comes out of lockdown.
That's lovely. Patrick, do you want to take the stage?
Easy. My background. In my background, I have a lot of ed tech. I worked in higher education for years, and in K-12 in the U.S. With various organizations, data organizations. So this is kind of a passion thing for me. Is like, I'm kind of done having education be at the bottom rung always. And if it's not readily apparent to the entire planet at this point that education is really at the back of everyone's mind, and look at what happened is as soon as we shut down the schools, pure chaos. I mean, I mentioned that tweet earlier, which is funny, but not funny, because now all of a sudden parents are realizing, oh, this school thing is hard. But we haven't enabled, and this is what I worry about. We haven't enabled the digital divide at all. We have an enormous amount of technology that helps us buy one more piece of shit, but does not help kids get to the next level. And it's amazing to me that we're sitting here in the 21st century, 2020, and I can't even. In our local school district, they were asking for donations of technology, like a Chromebook. I'm like, how's that even? But raves, I will say there are some great groups that are coming to the forefront now that are like, okay, how can we fix this? Not just big tech companies, but smaller ones as too, like our local internet service provider, Sonic. They're starting to put free Wi-Fi hotspots out for kids. I hope this is a thing that happens. Now it's just like, this is it. This is the demarcation point. We are not going to do the same thing after this. I really hope that. But there you go. My rant and rave. Education. Go team.
Thanks very much.
Well, I've got a rant. No rave today. Neil Stephenson, in one of his novels, he respelled bullshit with a Y, and made it into a scientific discipline, a thing to be studied and combated in one of his novels. And I think that needs to be more real. One of the problems that we've had in the past couple of months is just a flood of disinformation or bad information and rumors, conspiracy theories. And I think we need a better engineered response to this. And we need to treat research into fighting bullshit as a necessary scientific and engineering endeavor.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your rants and raves. I'm going to quickly, actually, it might be a bit of a rave, but it started off as a rant. I recently quit coffee and have been doing a diet to basically reset my health. Went to the doctor and he recommended I do that to see what foods are good and bad for me. And so I've had to cut out coffee, and I didn't realize how difficult that would be and how dependent I was on it. So that's my rant. But then today, for the first time, I tried a green tea, and I think I can get used to it. So maybe it's a bit of a rave. But thank you, everyone. Thanks for your time. Thank you all for watching. That is all we have time for today, sadly. You can find us on Twitter at OpenTeams Inc. and Quansight AI. So Amanda and Patrick, where can people find you and OpenTechResponse, and what is your call to action?
I'll let you go first, Amanda.
Sure. Oh, you want me to go first? So if you look from early next week on OpenTechResponse.com, you will find us there. I'm on Open UK, Amanda Brock UK, and also you'll find us on Response Open on Twitter.
And I'm on the Twitters as well, just Patrick McFadden. My DMs are open. Please ask anything. I'm on the OpenTechResponse Slack as well, and on the ASF Slack 24/7. So I'm in all the open Slacks. So you can find me. My name is pretty easy to find.
We've also included all the links down in the chat below, so you can find the Matrix, the Discourse, the Slack, and everything.
Yeah.
All right. So for those people who want to be involved in OpenTechResponse, if your project, say, is looking for volunteers, what do you do? Or if you're a person who wants to volunteer, what do you do?
Well, we've got those links. I think you can, if you're a project, you can go directly to the Google form and fill in the needs that you have for your project. You can fill that form in multiple times. So if you've got 5 or 6 volunteer needs, then fill it in 5 or 6 times. What we will do is the data entry in the back, and we'll send you a note to let you know when your project profile has been created, if it didn't already exist. And we'll send out emails once we have the matchmaking in the platform. Otherwise, you can just go and search for volunteers based on the skills that you need and use their profiles to reach out to them.
Guys, just before you wrap up, can we say thank you? I spoke to Patrick and we approached you guys, a month ago? Time is just like that.
What is time?
Exactly, right now. But the work you guys have done to spin this up for us is fantastic. I know Patrick agrees. It would have taken a long, long time for us to go out and start to build this from scratch, wherever we did it. So thank you very much for your contributions. It's really appreciated.
Absolutely.
Very glad we could help. Very
really appreciate that. Thank you.
A lot of time and resources. It wasn't cheap.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you like
I was going to say last thing, go on OpenTeams, create a profile, volunteer if you're an individual looking to volunteer. Thanks.
Yeah, awesome. Well, if everyone liked what they saw today, then please go to our YouTube channel and like and subscribe to see more of this kind of content. And we are all going to look forward to seeing you next episode.